In the last class, what we discussed? We discussed about actually we started second unit, right? For the section I started, I think. Please reply. We started second unit, right? Anybody is there?
Yes, ma'am.
We already started, right? Second unit.
I think yes, ma'am.
Requirement engineering, actually, the first portion is principles that guide practice. Core principles that guide each framework activity. I did not start because it contains a lot of principles that I will discuss after requirements gathering. So for one section, I already started and I completed some 3 steps: inception, elicitation, and I mean elaboration. I'm not sure whether it is your section or not. That's why I'm asking. Am I completed or not? Anyone? No one is in the class. Software practices, I will explain. These principles I will explain. There are a lot of principles you didn't remember. And that is so I started with requirement engineering. Anyone remember? Please remember. Started, yes. Okay. Then majority is not remembering whether I started that portion or not. Requirement engineering means we are gathering the requirements in a scientific way. That is called requirement engineering. So what are the steps for requirement engineering? First, you have to go for a feasibility study. Feasibility study means we are checking whether it is feasible or not. Means you collect the requirements, then we'll go for the feasibility check, economically feasible or technically feasible. So that feasibility study, after feasibility study, you will get a feasibility report. Report means in that one clearly mentioned these requirements. So some of the requirements are feasible to implement, some are not feasible to implement. We have budget constraint, all the details will be listed in the feasibility report. Then after the feasibility study, we will go for the requirement elicitation and the analysis process. So requirement elicitation, what was the elicitation? Inception and elicitation, we fix the objective, right? So detailed actually the first phase, what was the first phase? That 8 phases, I just started with 8 phases, but I did not explain all those 8 phases. What are those 8 phases? Anyone remember? Inception, elicitation, elaboration. Nobody's remembering, nobody's listening, right? Inception, elicitation, elaboration, negotiation, specification, violation, and requirement management are the 7 phases of the requirement engineering. Okay, in the 7 phases, I start with the inception. Inception means we are in the first phase, you will ask some context-free questions to the stakeholder team to understand the problem. Means who is behind this request and what is the need of doing this project, who will get the benefit, what is the business value, like some context-free questions, any context-free questions which is related to the project you can ask. Based on that answers, you can identify all the stakeholders who will have the interest to build the software. And means you are going to fix the objective or goal of your project. Okay, so that is the first part, we call it as inception. The second part is elicitation. Elicitation means you will fix the objective and more detailed in a more detailed way. Actually, elicitation more than context-free questions. We are more focused on the particular project questions. Then how we are going to implement it. How you are going to implement it, that we'll discuss. That how you are going to implement was not a matter in the first case. In the first inception phase, you are focusing on anything, any information which is related to the project. Who will get the benefit and what is the need, and the basic questions you are asking. Right. But in the second phase, you are more concentrating on the particular project. Then you can fix the objective. Okay. Now, at the time, you may face some difficulty like problem of scope, problem of understanding, problem of volatility. This thing I already discussed the previous class. Problem of scope means you may have some, you may face some problem with fixing the boundary of the system. Means how much details we need to collect and what is the boundary of the system you are going to do. You may have some confusion on that. That is called a scope, problem scope. How to fix the scope. The next one is problem understanding. Understanding means when the customer, he approached you with the requirements, he was not clear about the requirements, all the requirements. So he has some problem, understanding problem is there about his system. So that is the problem of understanding. You can't collect all the necessary information needed for the planning phase. So that is called problem understanding. Then problem volatility means requirements are always changing. It's not a fixed thing. So that is another problem. So these are main problems you're going to face when you're collecting the requirements or in the elicitation process. Then when it comes to elaboration, that is the third phase. In that one, whatever you collected using the inception elicitation process, that you are refining. It's like refining that requirements during the elaboration process, and you will not accept all the requirement, which one is necessary, which one is needed, necessary for your particular project. In the context-free, in the first phase, you are collecting all the context-free answers, not based on the particular project. Which one is related with that? What you are trying just to collect maximum information to fix the goal. But when come to the elaboration phase, you are more focusing on your user requirements, and you are refining that inception and elicitation process, whatever the data you collected, that you are refining more. And here you're focusing on more on technical model. How can you create a technical model? What are the requirements I need to collect for the technical model? And what are the features and constraints I have to face? Constraints when I'm going to face to implement this particular features. Those information you are more focusing on the elaboration phase. So here how when the end user will interact system, what are the problems you need to face? How can you interact? Use a graphical user interface or else terminal or those type of information. Also the GUI applications is needed or not. Everything you will define during this elaboration period. So this is the third phase. This is the elicitation analysis process. You can see first you have the process entry is there, first process entry phrase is there, then you come to domain understanding. What is your domain? That you have to understand the domain, and based on that you can go for the requirement validation. If you don't know the domain, you can't go for a requirement validation. Validation means you are checking with the customer. So this process is continuous. You can see this is a cyclic process. It will be there throughout your requirement gathering phase. And once you validate the requirements, you can go for a specification document or report. That is the output of that first part. And this one also is a cyclic thing. More and more processes are entered, and you should understand the domain, and you can go for the validation of the requirements, and you can define those requirements in the form of a document. Like that, it is a continuous process. That's why you can see there are so many arrows. Then how to fix the domain? This you can see the requirement collection. This is a bidirectional, means you have to collect the requirements, and based on that you will understand the domain. And once you understand the domain, based on that you can collect more and more requirements. So this one is a cyclic, and it's a bidirectional process. Both are dependent on each other. And once you collect the requirements, you can go for the classification. This part also is happening many times, so it's a cyclic thing. And after the classification, you can go for the conflict resolution, because some features you can even implement. But at the same time, if you implement one feature, you can't implement the other one. Some conflicts may occur that we are analyzing during the analysis phase. Okay, that's why this design analysis is a single phase. When you are designing, you are analyzing, doing analysis also doing in parallel. So next we are going for the prioritization. Prioritization means you are prioritizing the requirement based on the need. So customer is asking you, the customer is asking you to implement some features in the particular phase. And after that, some features are not so urgent, so you can postpone those features for the next cycle. Okay. So that is the prioritization. Prioritization, there are some particular rules. If it is a must-have requirement, you should include in the current phase. Okay. If it is could have, it is would have, it is on have. Based on that, you can postpone those requirements for the coming cycles too. So that is the prioritization process, and all these processes are interrelated, and it's continuous and cyclic in nature. So that is the elicitation analysis process. Okay. Is it clear? Is it clear to you? Please respond. I am speaking continuously for
Yes, ma'am.
only one person understood the portion. What about the remaining 42 participants? Are you there or in tea break? I think most of you. I think most of you went for a tea. It's 4:40, 4:25. They are not at desk. How many of you are listening there? Otherwise, it's waste of my time, right? I'm speaking continuously for the lab and this class continuously for the past 1.5 hours. Anybody is there? I'm asking you, anybody is there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I got one response, or not two responses. So 3 members are there, probably 3 are there. But I won't repeat this processing in this portion again. Once I complete, it's completed. We won't get time to repeat. Okay. So if you are there, you listen, and I won't repeat it again. So that is the elaboration process. Next is negotiation. Negotiate means you are negotiating with the with the customer. Okay, the customer is asking you to implement something, but he is not aware about the technical details, and he is not bothered about whether is it able to implement technically and within the budget. That is, as a requirement engineer and analyst, it's your duty to analyze and make a report whether it is feasible or not. So then you found it's not feasible, when you can negotiate with the customer that I couldn't complete this requirements within this budget, within the time limit, and it's not supporting technically. And if there is some conflicting requirements are there, you could negotiate with the customer. So negotiation task as a software engineer design, how will the project be achieved with limited business resources? Okay, so requirement engineer reconcile the conflict among different customers and requirement through negotiation. Means customer is also not a single person. Multiple persons have different needs, and those needs may be conflicting. So you have to convince them those part. You ask them to rank the requirement, discuss the conflict in priority. Okay, ranking means which requirement you need to implement first, and you can categorize that. Risk associated with requirement identified and analyzed. So if it's not possible to implement, you can suppose if you implement something and it will affect the system, it will comes under risk category. So risk associated with one particular requirement, if it would be there, you can identify, analyze it, and you create a rough process of development and assess the impact of the requirement on the project cost and delivery. Mainly, we focus on the project cost and delivery. Okay, this is project cost and delivery. We are bargaining mainly, and conflicting requirements. I'm highlighting this point because you could not be able to remember all the points. Then you just go through the thing. Okay. Risk associated with the requirements, what you are negotiating. Then conflicting requirements. Where is it? Okay. These are the things you are going to negotiate with the customer. Then coming to specification. Specification means specifying, means different things to different people. Means you're specifying it. General means one thing for everyone. Specification means different things for different people. So what is a specification? Here we are mentioning about software requirement specification. That's what at the lab period I said. Project also you have to write the software requirement specification for your particular project. The requirement you should mention. So the work product means the requirement. This phase work product is the SRS document. Means the report. It is a document. It contains all the relevant details. I will show you one SRS document. Then you will get clear what are the things I have to include in the SRS document. So here we formalize the requirement. Okay. Formalize means graphically or textually or mathematically or using prototypes. You can formalize in a more technical way. Before actually SRS document is we are writing for the developers, not for the customer. That we are collecting the requirements from the customer. He's picking his needs, and that we are written in the form of document. It's like not normal, natural language. Means like English like type of language. But when you create SRS, you mention the details. It's not that too. You can use the technical terms. That is a formalized way. You can use the graphs. You can use DFTs. You can use human diagrams. You can use chart. You can use technical terms, mathematical notations. Anything is possible in the SRS because you are writing not for the customer. You are writing for the developer. Next is validation. What is validation? We ensure that the requirements which we collected meet the customer need. This is what the customer asked me. Sometimes we will interpret in our own way. What the customer is asking, we understood in some other ways. Okay. So we should make sure before you start, you have to validate it. Then that is a process called validation phase. Otherwise, you will create a quality product, but it's not the user requirement. It should justify the user requirement. So validation mechanism is going through many ways, but mainly formal meetings. Formal technical review meets will be there, and that will all stakeholders will participate. And at the time, they will discuss these things using some diagrams or chart to easily understand that customer. At the time, the customer is agreeing, okay, this is what I need. That is validation. It's a process. It's one of the way to validate the requirements. So suppose if you find out that some interpretation mistakes are there, the requirement engineer is also a human being, right? Suppose someone told you something and you interpret it in a different way, the content. Obviously, there may be a chance of error. So area where the clarification is needed. What is the missing information? What are the inconsistency? What are the conflicting requirements? What are the unrealistic requirements? Some requirements is not possible to implement. Everything you can write down. You can keep as a document. So next is requirement management. Management means it comes everything under this to identify, control, and track the requirement and changes. All this comes in for an ongoing project. Okay, suppose when a project is going on, the requirements we are collecting in parallel, because in every cycle there is an option to change. So at the time, you need to identify, control, and track the requirement and changes. The process is done by a technical team that's called requirement manager. So for every requirement, we should assign one unique identification number will be the. It's not easy to mention requirement every time. So you can mention the requirement in the form of an identification number. After finalize the requirement, you can create a traceability table. In the traceability table, we will mention each and every requirement with an ID number. So for every feature, a traceability table is there. Sources traceability table is there. Dependency, subsystem, interface, different traceability table will be there. This is an example for a generic traceability table. It's not mention of specific thing. So here you could see the requirements. These are one of the requirements. Requirement 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like n number of requirements you can in the form of matrix. And the specific aspect of the system or environment you can mention here. The resources which we need here. If it is a resource and traceability table, you could check with the particular requirements need AO3 and AO5 to implement, and RO2, the next requirements need AO1 and AO3, like that you could mention here. So feature traceability table, source traceability table, dependency traceability table, subsystem, it based on the what you are going to trace for validation purpose, right? So that one you could mention in the form of a matrix. That is called a traceability table. So if you already are possible to implement, you could put a tick. Like you can give marking. Otherwise, it doesn't. It means you couldn't implement the remaining things that way also in different way. This is a form of general traceability table. General traceability table does not mention which one are the columns. Our column is requirement. This may be the means column rows represent requirements and columns may be feature, sources, subsystem, or interface. Anything would be there. Can replace with anything. So this is the 7 stages of requirement engineering. Here you could see the requirement engineering. First is feasibility study, then we'll get a feasibility report. And then requirement elicitation analysis. Then you will get, you can create a system model as the output and requirement specification document. The requirement specification document, using that you can go for the requirement validation phase, and user and system requirements you can list out in the requirement specification. You can list out what are the user requirements, what are the system requirements, what are the hardware and software requirements, everything you can list out. And anyway, this is the output of this phase is document only, the requirement document. It will contain feasible, manageable requirements. So the requirement engineering process inputs are existing system information, stakeholder need, organization standard, external regulations, domain information, all are input to the requirement engineering process. From that, based on the some standards of the organization and regulations, and comparing with the existing system information, a stakeholder can go for agreed requirements, system specification, system model. These are the output. So the requirements which we collect from the customer, we are using all other information necessary, that is like a external regulation, domain information, organizational standard, and existing system information. We can create some agreed requirements, system specification, system model. These are the output of the requirement engineering process, and this is the input for analysis and design. Are you listening? How many of you are following me? Please raise your hands. I have no other option to know whether you are listening me. Next class, I will go for a poll. Actually, I did not create any poll questions. At present, very few members are listening to the class. I don't know why. Very few are listening. Few members are listening. Every other remaining students went for a tea break. Not break, I think they simply joined and they left. Last hour means it's waste of time. Students. Yeah, I know it's not so easy to listen an online class from morning onwards. It's not like a physical class. It's something difficult, but we have no option, right? We don't have option. It's for your safety and security. So take it in a positive way. Even though sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's difficult to listen online classes, take it in a positive way. That you're actually lucky enough to get an online session during the pandemic. So initiating the requirement engineering process, I will stop here. I will stop here. Initiating the requirement engineering process. Why the requirement engineering process is a tough thing? Because the customer, he cannot able to present physically on the development site. He may locate in some other country. And if he's not clear about the requirements, and if he does not have technical knowledge, what is the need of technical knowledge? Suppose if you need a system which you're going to develop in a technical way, but if you're not familiar with technical terms, if you're not familiar with the need of requirements, or the customer is not a technically well-versed person, there is a limit to communicate. So engineers, so whoever it is, who are in the panel, the whole stakeholder, so we should identify first. That particular project development, we should identify. The next, recognize the multiple viewpoints, because marketing group has their own viewpoint, business people have their own viewpoint, and end users have their own viewpoint. So this is the reason we wrote different UML diagrams for different people, because it represents their perspective. For example, marketing people, what they are interested in function and features. We should be excited in the market. Then only the people will go for it, right? The product. So that is the marketing people perspective. So they will more focus on the aesthetic appearance, its attractive features, some fancy features. Some product having some fancy features. It does not have any use, but still it's having fancy features. Why? To attract the customers. So that is the marketing idea. So the marketing group will think in that way, and business managers features list in budget. Business managers are more focusing whether we could able to complete this project within the budget. Okay, end user easiness, how easy to use, understandable. Is it understandable system? Is it complicated one? Can I use it? Can I use it very easily? So that part is an end user perspective. So different group has different perspective. So we have to, when you go for the technical review meet, all stakeholders will participate to represent their side. So next is working towards collaboration. So there are some area which is common, and some area there are some conflicts, and some the area there are some inconsistencies. So we should identify those area and work collaboratively. So that is the next part. Asking first question means I told you the first one is inception, right? Inception phase means you are going to ask the context-free questions based on what is your benefit. So that is the first phase. If the initiating the RE process means requirement engineering process means the first 3 steps are before asking the context, before start the context-free questions, means before start the inception phase. So first we have to identify the stakeholder and recognize the viewpoints and try to collaborate even in the conflicting areas also, or inconsistencies. If something is there, you should focus on that. So this is the part you have to do before you ask the first question or context-free questions. That one, the last part is inception part. Then only you can go for the inception, elicitation, elaboration, negotiation, then specification, validation, and engineer management, requirement management. So these are the steps for requirement engineering functions. Is it clear to everyone? Is it clear? Okay. So I think it's time to leave. It's 4:47. Any doubts? Any doubts? Am I audible to you? No doubts? No. Only Madhvi is responding. She has no doubt. What about others? Majority of them are not listening. They are going somewhere. Okay, if you have doubts, ask me. Otherwise, you can leave. Okay. 2 members respond. Thank you.